You're listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. She is passionate, direct, and sometimes a little sarcastic, but always gives you what you need to succeed in business. Now, here's your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 52. Oh my gosh, you heard that right. Episode 52. This is my 1-year anniversary of Productivity Straight Talk. And I honestly couldn't be any more excited about bringing another year to you. This has been such a journey for myself, my team, my business. And honestly, I ask myself every single day why I didn't do podcasting sooner. I absolutely love this platform. I honestly couldn't think of a better platform that can capture my ideas and convey to you my personality and my thoughts about all of the random things that we talk about here on Productivity Straight Talk. I also love that I have the opportunity to interview and go deep and build relationships with some amazing guests that we've had here on Productivity Straight Talk. And if you're new to this podcast, then you need to go back and hear some of the amazing episodes that have already been produced and guests that I've had on. Today's episode is Taking a Stand for Your Health and Wellness with Dr. Valorie Davidson. So Dr. Valorie Davidson is actually my own personal doctor. And I am going deep and getting raw and vulnerable and behind the scenes, where I interview my own doctor about my own health journey and things that I have struggled with in the last couple years, and how that health and challenges with my health have actually affected my productivity. The reason I've decided to really go deep and open up behind the curtains and just tell it all is because the more and more people that I speak to one-on-one about the challenges that I've had in my life about health, I've realized that there are so many out there that have very similar challenges, and yet they're struggling by themselves. And some don't even know that it is a health challenge. They just can't wrap their mind around why they have low energy, brain fog. They can't focus when they feel like everyone else can focus and get their most important work done. Well, today I'm going deep and I am exploring all the different reasons why and how our health affects our day-to-day lives, our productivity, and thus our business, our personal relationships, and just about every aspect of our lives. I'm really looking forward to you meeting my doctor, our guest, Dr. Valorie Davidson. Dr. Davidson is the co-owner of Progress Your Health, Inc. and a co-host of Progress Your Health podcast. Yes, you heard that right. She has a podcast, and I had already been going to her for about a year before I realized she had a podcast. And when I realized she had a podcast, I was like, of course, that's why you're my doctor. Not only are you amazing, but she is also out in the world giving advice and helping people on the same platform. She specializes in women's health and bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Dr. Davidson helps busy people feel and perform their best by balancing and optimizing hormones. It is her mission to motivate, educate, and empower her patients to improve health and age gracefully. Dr. Davidson is a naturopathic doctor licensed in both California and Washington. She is a graduate of Bastyr University in Seattle, Washington, which is one of the leading institutions in natural health education. Dr. Davidson also received her undergraduate education from the University of Washington with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. She currently lives with her husband in Bellingham, Washington. And this is another little fun fact, is that she is actually remote. I live here in Las Vegas, and my doctor does not live here in Las Vegas. So not only does she leverage podcasting, but she's virtual. And just as I help my clients all day on Zoom, I actually can jump off of a client meeting and right onto a doctor's meeting with my doctor via Zoom. And so this is like the ultimate fit for myself, my lifestyle. Being a busy entrepreneur, there's no waiting room visits. There's no long lines and setting appointments months and months in advance. I feel like I am really able to take advantage of my relationship with my doctor because it fits so well into my current lifestyle. Now, Dr. Davidson is a specialist in women's hormones, but today is not just for women. So for all of you guys listening, stay tuned. She dives deep and explains how the different symptoms and things that we're feeling myself as a woman, but also how that shows up in men. And similarly, how you can help men with some of the same advice she gave me. When listening in on my conversation with Dr. Davidson, you will discover why you're feeling off or like lacking energy. How to stay off the cortisol, glucose, insulin roller coaster. Now that was a mouthful, but you will find out what that's about and why that affects our health so much. The impact of adrenal fatigue on your sleep, libido, and energy. Let me tell you, adrenal fatigue is a very, very real thing. And I believe that entrepreneurs experience this very often because our businesses create a lot of stress, or it could create a lot of stress and long-term stress in our bodies, whether it's financial stress, business stress, family stress, you name it. Long-term stress can create adrenal fatigue. So listen up and hear about how you can work on improving that. Next is what your blood work isn't telling you about your health, and so much more. So let's dive right in and meet Dr. Davidson. Hello, Dr. Davidson, and welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, of course. And so I just wanted to repeat, because I'm sure that the listeners already heard, but you are my doctor. And I really, really think that you've helped me quite a bit. And I have my own journey and story that we'll probably share during this episode. But I felt that this topic is essential for anybody that's looking to improve their productivity, because it's not always a time thing. It really is an energy thing. And for a lot of my life, I had enough time, but not enough energy. And that's what I've been working on with you. And so I want to just share some things that I think would be really valuable to our listeners today.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's really beautiful that you're open to sharing your own story and having that transparency. I think your listeners are going to love it. And it's something that, I think a lot of people are going to relate to, because people don't realize that they're not alone. And just like your clients that you see and that you deal with and your listeners, is a lot of times it's really about that stress and that energy. We always feel like we don't have enough time because, time is not a renewable resource. But
Right.
if we have the energy, and like what you preach and teach is that productivity and that efficiency, then we'll feel like we have a lot more time in our day.
Absolutely. I feel like there are some people that are definitely up against the clock. Like they don't have enough time. There simply isn't enough time because of various things. And I work on all of those techniques and strategies with my clients. But there is a point in which you can have a lot of techniques and strategies to make sure you're focusing on the right activities, but you run out of energy or you have brain fog and you can't focus. And that is kind of, being really transparent and honest, that's where I was at, is that I had, and I do use all of my strategies. And I know that they work because they've worked multiple times in my life, but I had come up to a point where I realized that I had plenty of time to do what mattered most. I simply didn't have the energy.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, when we're talking about energy, I do think that there's a little, I guess you could break it up a little bit into physical energy and mental energy, because a lot of people do come in and they say, I just have no energy. I'm so tired all the time. I can't get done what I need to get done. But if I ask them, well, hey, can you help me lift this desk and pack some boxes and take them outside? Do you have the physical energy to do that? They'll say, yeah. I'll say, do you go for walks? Do you exercise? I have people that exercise every day, but they tell me they don't have any energy. So I think there's a little differentiation between their physical energy and their mental energy, because I think the mental energy is really key.
Oh my gosh, that is brilliant. I never even really thought of that. And I think that that is a common challenge, is that we sit down to do our most important work and we don't have the energy to proceed through or to get it done, because it takes a lot of energy to focus, I would assume, and to channel that energy into creation and creating things in our businesses.
And you're right, especially for your clients, and being an entrepreneur, being a busy person, being a business owner, is you have to have that creative energy to be able to further your business or further your career career or working with your clients. But when you're drugged down by stress and the minutia of life, because face it, we all have it. We all have stress, whether it's life stress, job stress, traffic stress, commuting stress, it doesn't matter. We all have it. But when you're just drugged down like that, you lose that creative energy. So I'll talk to people and they'll tell me I have so many things that I want to do, but I don't do them because they feel like they're so tired. My clients, my patients that I see is I really do see very healthy people. They don't have a life-threatening chronic disease and they've been to a lot of doctors and their doctor says, oh, we ran your blood work and you're fine. And they say, well, I don't feel fine, but you're fine. You know, you're beautiful, you're great, you're happy, go on your way and live a great life, but they don't feel fine. They don't feel good. And kind of a common theme is they're busy, you know, like we all are. They're stressed. They have low energy, especially that motivation and that mental energy. And a lot of times what tends to go with that is weight gain, especially in the middle, in the stomach.
Yes. So essentially, you just described me when I came to you. I was referred to you by a few people because I was seeking something a little more alternative than my normal doctor. I wasn't getting anywhere. I didn't feel like I was being listened to. And so I'm going to share just a little bit of how I ended up in your office and my journey. I had actually decided to work with you as a 2-month graduation to completely changing my diet because I knew that to come to you, that one of the first things you would say is, you know, let's look at what you're eating, what you're putting in your body. And I wanted higher level. I wanted to really understand how I could take my health to that next level. So prior to coming to you, because at some point in my life, I picked up, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but I wasn't allergic, but I have a reaction to gluten and dairy where it creates inflammation in my body. And it wasn't always that way. And it took me a long time to figure out that those were my triggers. And previously to coming to see you, in 3 years, I had been diagnosed with 30 sinus infections, which means 30 rounds of antibiotics that had no effect. Like, honestly, I felt good when I was on the antibiotics compared to not on them. But if you have 30 in 3 years, it meant nothing was being fixed. I was just kind of like covering up my symptoms. And within those 2 years, I had 2 surgeries. So at some point, I was told that the only thing they could do for me in traditional medicine was to put me on steroids. And I'm talking about prednisone. And this was to reduce my inflammation in my sinuses. And at the time, I couldn't breathe. And I had just had my second surgery. And I was like, yep, whatever. And they're like, you're going to gain weight. And I was like, you know what? I'm good with that. Like, I'm really, really thin. And if I can breathe and I can keep moving on with my life, weight's no problem. But darn it, they didn't tell me what I learned after working with you, and that it wasn't directly the prednisone that created the weight gain. It was that the prednisone threw all of my hormones out of whack. And therefore, I was gaining a lot of weight.
Absolutely. Because I remember when you came in, you had mentioned that you had had all those antibiotics, which that kind of disrupts a lot, you know, on its own side when you're looking at the intestinal well-being and the gut flora, but then being on that prednisone. I remember talking to you wondering, you know, prednisone chronically is not something healthy that somebody wants to take for a chronic amount of time.
Yes, but what they don't tell you is your body starts getting used to it and you stop creating the natural hormones. And that's the circle and evolution of where I came. And so I did have something that onset it. And then over time, I felt really good. But by the time I landed in your office, I had been on prednisone for about 1.5 years, healthy, no sinus infections, no symptoms, nothing like that. But I knew that I needed to get off of that. I felt like I was having emotional highs and lows, lot of mood swings. I felt like I had brain fog, and I was very challenged because I was rapidly moving and growing my business. I have a family and a child, and I knew what it felt like before, and I knew that something wasn't right. And I was getting nowhere with doctor after doctor after doctor. And so I went to you. And so that's where we're going to pick up, because I think that it was also a combination of stress. I said that I was going to be really transparent and vulnerable in this episode because I know that I am not the only one. And I know that when I do share my story on a one-on-one basis, women and men and people and business owners everywhere are like, oh my gosh, it's very similar. During this time, on a personal side, my husband had been on the road for almost 4 years, 90% of the time. And so I was a single mom and I was running a business and I was all things, right? And looking back, I simply had too much on my plate. And because I was never going to use the excuse that I was a single mom or that I had these other obligations, why I wasn't going to grow my business at an exponential rate. Then obviously, this is like the perfect storm. So now I'm sitting in Dr. Davidson's office and she's like, girl, I got you. We're going to figure this out. And so Dr. Davidson, share with me what your thoughts were when you met with me and what did you decide was best for me and people of similar situations that had the perfect storm of stress and hormone issues and all that stuff.
And I know you, even when you came into the office, and this is really common, is nothing is going to stop you from doing what you want to do. Because I know you were going to, right? I knew you have that tenacity to be like, okay, physical, whatever, nothing's going to keep me from building my business, taking care of my family, doing what I have to do. Of course, at that A+ level, right? Because you're an A student. You're going to keep your A grade no matter what. Even at the sacrifice of your body starting to talk to you a little bit, like, hey, something's off. Hey, help me here. And for you, because you're a young, healthy female, is it all started with the stress. And when you think about stress is the bull in the china shop. Our adrenal glands secrete out a whole bunch of hormones in response to stress. And our adrenal glands are supposed to save us. So if somebody's looking for a Google topic and you want to find a lot to hear about, is Google adrenal fatigue. And it's not really that your adrenals are fatigued because you have healthy glands. I consider it more of a dysfunction because our adrenal glands are supposed to save us from that bear that's running out of the forest and it's going to come eat me. And if I see a bear running out of the forest, all my adrenaline's going to go through the roof, my cortisol is going to go through the roof, and I'm going to run like the wind to get away from that predator. Of course, I'm going to get away from that predator in either 15 seconds I get away from that bear or it eats me. Not like what you've gone through and what a lot of you listeners are going through too, is it's almost like you're being chased by a bear 24/7. When you have deadlines and you have emails and you are multitasking like crazy and you're trying to keep a professional life, also a personal life too, because we got to have some balance there. And then, of course, because we're gaining weight, we're going to eat less and exercise more, which is another physical stressor like the bear is chasing us. It creates that sort of, like you were saying, the perfect storm, because the body can't understand why is that bear still chasing you. It can't differentiate between the two. It's either save your life now and run away from the bear or get eaten. And that's what it was for you, Amber, is you were being chased by the bear chronically. So then what happens is you started with the adrenal glands, which then manifests over to the thyroid gland, because our thyroid hormones are secreting all these different hormones and they work together. Is when that adrenals get a little burdened, then the thyroid drops down, because we saw your thyroid hormones drop and you absolutely do not have thyroid disease. You don't have Hashimoto's disease, but the thyroid hormones drop, which then comes down to the reproductive hormones. Because when people are thinking about hormones, they're thinking, estrogen, progesterone, those girl stuff. But no, men have hormones, women have hormones, and they're not just reproductive hormones, but they did end up influencing your reproductive hormones at the same time. So it was like this perfect triad between the adrenal hormones, the thyroid hormones, and the reproductive hormones.
Right. So let's go back to that analogy of the bear chasing us, this heightened sense of stress. So I shared with you or with everyone listening some of the factors that I believe contributed to that feeling of stress. And if you would have asked me, Dr. Davidson, if I was stressed, I would have told you all day, every day, no, I'm good. Like, I got this. The house is clean and my business is growing. My son is happy. He gets to all his practices. Nothing's falling through the cracks. And I did not feel stressed. And if anyone met me, I don't know that they would have described me as stressed, but my body knew. Like, my body was doing everything it could to keep me at that level of, getting it all done and being everything to everyone, to where it became like my new normal. And so for me, it kind of creeped up the side effects of being at that heightened, a bear is chasing me every day. Like, wake up early, stay up late, do whatever it is that we need to do. And I'm sharing this because every single person can relate to this on some level.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you notice too, which is a common theme, whether it's male or females, is when you have, like you get a nasty email, we've all gotten them. And then it's just like a bear chasing you. You see the news, it's stressful. It's just like a bear's chasing you. You have a deadline or you miss it, but it's like for you, like I said, you're the A student. You're not going to drop one ball whatsoever. So then your body feels it. So then cortisol is a hormone that comes up. We all have heard of cortisol. They see the TV shows. It says, oh, cortisol, big belly fat. Yeah, there is some implication between the two. But what cortisol does when it comes up is it messes with your glucose, which is your blood sugar. So even if you've eaten or you haven't eaten, when that cortisol comes up, it causes that glucose and your insulin, which insulin comes from the pancreas. It unlocks the key to the cell to allow glucose to go into the cell. You get sort of this cortisol, glucose, insulin roller coaster, which which is all from stress. It doesn't have to necessarily have to even do straight up from food, but it's all from stress. And people will have those high sugar cravings. And that's where a lot of the ups and the downs in the mood come from, where they feel anxious and irritable and sad, and they're all over the board. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's all about our girl hormones. You see that in men too.
I remember you telling me that because I had a craving for sweets and caffeine. And I had gone my entire adult life without caffeine up until about, I would say 6 to 8 months before I came in to see you. And at that point, I was drinking caffeine 2 or 3 times a day, energy drinks, coffee, and I was also eating a lot of like chocolate. And I remember you telling me that, you know what? It's this mental trap of I knew I was self-sabotaging myself. I felt like I was self-sabotaging myself, but you had told me, well, because your hormones are out of whack, that you're genuinely craving this sugar. Like your body's craving it. And then as I was able to level out my hormones, I was like, wow, I don't really need it today or want it. And I wasn't even thinking about it. So then it wasn't that vicious circle of self-sabotage.
Yeah. Or even, being self-deprecating at the same time, because it's all about biology. When you're under that kind of stress, that glucose, that insulin, the cortisol is going all over the place. You want to eat the chocolate. You want to borrow the energy because that's what caffeine, that's what coffee is. It's like a credit card. You're borrowing energy, but unfortunately you have to pay it back plus interest later down the road. But it's your crutch to get you through what you have to get through. And then people do feel self-deprecating about saying, hey, I gained weight, or why can't I stop the candy? I was talking to a patient the other day and she tells me she's a huge, she works as admin at a school, which is hugely stressful because, kids and parents and all that. And she can't stop eating the candy because it's sitting there in a bowl on someone else's desk. And I said, it's all biology. Don't beat yourself up. Once you can change some of that biology, then you don't, just like with you, Amber, just like, you don't notice that you want to have any more of those energy drinks. You notice you don't really want to have the chocolate.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what were some of the other recommendations you gave? Actually, I'm going to share one of the recommendations you gave that I was surprised about was not to do like very high impact exercise.
Crazy cardio.
And like crazy cardio, because you're thinking, okay, I'm overweight. Like by the time I had seen you, I'd gained 40 pounds within 18 months to 2 years. And most of it had been put on in the last 10 to 12 months before coming to you. And for me, that was a lot. And so I'm like, of course she's going to tell me to get off my butt and go exercise, like, get rid of all these calories. But because this was a hormone and adrenal thing, and I know you're going to use the right words and I'm not, but why did you tell me that the solution wasn't to just go out and do high cardio?
Because honestly, and like you said, you had gained that weight in a very short amount of time. So we know that it was coming from something other than, I have people with, up and down with their weight since they were kids. But for you, it was a short amount of time. And you're petite, you're little. So 40 pounds on you feels like a lot. So
it did.
When you're doing like that crazy cardio, intense boot camp, and it's not to say those aren't, I love them. I like CrossFit and some of those things. Granted, I'm really bad at it, but I try. I'm like the worst in the class, but I try. But when you do intense cardio like that, it raises up your cortisol. It raises up that cortisol when you're doing one of those. And then you're already putting cortisol on top of cortisol. And what cortisol does is it mobilizes your protein from your muscle tissues, that specifically like in your glutes or your thighs, your quads, because that's where we have a lot of muscle. And then it'll take that protein, those amino acids from your muscles and turn it into glucose. And then the insulin will come out of the pancreas and take that glucose and shuttle it into a cell. And then you end up trading muscle for fat in the stomach. And granted, people really like it. It makes them feel good. It's like their therapy. But I always say back it down a little bit because we want to calm the cortisol. One of the best exercises you can do for your adrenal glands is just go for a long walk. Go for a 45-minute, 3-mile walk. That is the best thing. You're still working out your muscles. You're still improving your bone density because it's your body on gravity on the ground. That is one of the best things you can do. And if somebody wants to do something a little bit more heightened than walking, because I say do walking too, is doing more like weightlifting. So when you're building up the muscle and you're doing weights, and trust me, doing weights, your heart is still pounding out of your chest. You can still raise up your heart rate doing weights, but you're not raising up the cortisol like doing that crazy cardio. Instead, you're raising up the testosterone, you're raising up the growth hormone, and then the cortisol in a smaller amount when you do more weightlifting.
Okay. Yes, that makes perfect sense. And I think that you just gave a lot of people probably permission to start off by walking if they're not exercising already and knowing that they're going in that right direction. So, Dr. Davidson, we've talked a lot about my symptoms, but my guess is that this adrenal fatigue and hormone imbalances have many different symptoms that maybe I didn't have. So, can you share with us, like, what kind of symptoms would one experience if they have felt and didn't know that the bear's been chasing them day after day? What does that look like?
And it really is, I'm talking about you because you're female, you're female, but you do see this in men too, because we both have the same, females have stress. I think we're supposed to be super women and we can do it all, but men have a tremendous amount of stress on their shoulders. I don't think people even realize that because they're almost like they've been raised to, hey, you have to produce, you have to provide, and they have a lot of stress on their shoulders. And I see a lot of men's hormones, even young men in their mid 30s, and their hormones are way off. And what they do notice is because, we all try to be the A students, is the libido drops, like immediately sex drive drops. When someone's under a lot of stress and they're tired and their motivation drops down, is that libido, it has run away with the mental energy. It's nowhere to be found. And you'll also see a lot of sleep disruptions. Probably more sleep disruptions in females rather than males, because I think we're a little bit more complicated, but we're way worth it. But we are certainly more complicated than the boys. But you will see sleep issues, especially trouble staying asleep. So, because we always see commercial ads and people like, hey, take all this stuff to try to fall asleep. But really what I'll find is people have trouble staying asleep is they'll wake up periodically through the night, or they'll wake up for an hour and a half and then they fall back asleep. And that really is, again, about that cortisol, is that cortisol is bouncing up and down at night. And then by the time you do wake up in the morning, the cortisol is really low. So you don't bounce out of bed. You don't want to hit the ground running, which is why we turn to a cup of coffee.
Yes. I was thinking that one of the things that we can talk about is how I think that people really want to kind of put a Band-Aid or fix symptoms, not really realizing that the reason they're not sleeping is all the way boiled down to imbalances in their hormone, or the reason that they have no energy. They just want to, like I did, just didn't know, like, okay, I'm going to have coffee, or just give me an energy drink or something. Like, those are all Band-Aids to the symptoms. And at some point, I felt like I was patching like a sinking ship, where I was like trying to put Band-Aids on all these random things, where I thought when you slow down after going that fast, you don't really think about it. You just do what you have to do. And then at some point I looked around and I was like, this isn't normal. I'm a healthy young woman. Like, this is just not okay. And that's when I started doing research and realizing that this might be an underlying issue with this tiny, tiny little pill that I take every day called, Prednisone, that I thought was trying to fix me. That was my trigger. Well, that's what I believe my trigger was. And so everyone has their own triggers. Some of it could be no medication at all, and I would assume just stress. What are some other ways in which you see people end up with an imbalance in their hormones with adrenal fatigue?
I do think a lot of it is chronic stress, because like I'd mentioned earlier, is our bodies are not equipped to deal with chronic stress. We're equipped to deal with saving my life in this moment, in this second of time, which would be a predator or something that's going to hurt me, not low levels of chronic stress. Because seriously, in our life, nothing horrible is going to happen to me where I'm going to die, but I'm still going to get maybe, like I said, a nasty email, or I'm running late, or I got to drive across town, or I got to deal with this issue that cropped up. There's all these low levels of chronic stress, and people, I think, we have beautiful lives. I have another patient I was talking to the other day. He has a fantastic life. His daughter just got married. Another daughter's getting married. They're building a house in Utah, but those are all very stressful, even though it's good stress. So it really is low levels of chronic stress, I think, over time.
Yes. A lot of our listeners, I'm going to say, because I'm pretty in tune with the listenership here at Productivity Straight Talk, is that they're feeling overwhelmed by running a business. In my business, like through coaching and group coaching and the services I provide, are all about how do I help them reduce stress by managing their calendar better. My last episode that just went live was how to cut the shit to simplify your life, right? And I was speaking from true experiences, like what are all the things that I had to cut out to really reduce that stress? And to do more, to multiply, we have to simplify. And I have been walking that talk for quite a while now, in that what are all the ways that I can cut back both personally and professionally so that I can ultimately excel? I've shared a lot of stories through the podcast, but I have resigned from mastermind groups that I absolutely loved. I have resigned from associations that I served on the board from. I have delegated out more. I have hired help in my business. Like, it wasn't like take a pill, figure out your hormones. Like, I was coming at this from all different ways as a holistic health. So I was eating healthier, or I still am. I was reducing a lot of stuff that was in my life that I had too many hats to wear. And one of them is the biggest one is that I told you the bigger stress that came in my personal life was my husband being gone for 4 years. And we were able to hit a huge milestone in that my business was doing well enough to bring him home last January. So as of this recording, it's been 13 months and he's been a full-time dad, like at home. And that has contributed a ton. It was a huge personal goal for us, huge business goal. Like, that was the reason why I was growing my business so rapidly, was to bring him home. But more so, if you look at me, people are like, oh my gosh, you look amazing. And I'm like, my husband's home. Like, that was something that I knew I needed because I love my husband. Like, I was literally missing him, and that was a form of stress. So I was looking at all these different ways in which I had stress being accumulated and just worked on them one by one by one.
Oh my goodness. And that's amazing. And truly, on a side note, I'm so happy that your husband is home. That's like, it's, yeah, because, we all love love, and I love to hear happy love stories. So
yeah,
I think that is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was just a big deal for us. And you were saying that men have stress. So there's a lot of men that listen to this podcast. My husband is an extremely good provider. He worked himself 6 or 7 days a week so that I could get my business off the ground and never questioned how much my business was bringing home, and did whatever it took to not only provide for our family, but to fuel my dream of servicing people through my business, of having a business. And so my way was not just to bring us together, but to pay him back for that. Like, hey, you've done amazing. Like, come home, do what you want to do. And in return, it's helped me, right? And so it really served a lot of different goals personally and professionally. But I would have to say that was one of the major life choice decisions we made together that I know that was better for the whole family, including my health.
Oh, and that I would say is number one, like especially what you do for your clients and for the listeners listening, is that is probably one of the best things somebody can do for them is work with you to find out ways to literally cut the fat and reduce that stress. Because I think sometimes that forest and trees analogy is we don't know what we don't exactly need to move forward. Instead, we're carrying all the, like I said, the minutia of life, or all this stuff is dragging us down, when really working with somebody to be able to let that go is probably number one. I think that's number one, because you do see it. And even you can testify that we did do your blood work. You don't have a thyroid issue, but your thyroid function was subclinically low. Your inflammation was high. Like you said, you were talking about transparency. Your female hormones were off. And you'll see that in men too. Like I said, men in their 30s, they have a lot of stress on their systems, and they're expected to hold on to all this stuff. And their testosterone is like that of a 70-year-old man. Because, for you and I, we have a lot of hormones going on. I kind of call us females we're more like a symphony of hormones, where men, they got one main instrument in their orchestra. And that's way out, like I said, but we're the complicated ones. But you'll see that testosterone just dive, and they'll wonder why their libido ran off, their motivation dropped down, their muscle mass has gone down. And for men, they get more irritable, where us ladies, we get irritable, but also anxious. We get kind of that wound up feeling. And you'll do the blood work and you'll see those adrenal hormones are low, the thyroid hormones are off. But because of the reference ranges a lot in the lab work, because labs and your primary care, your internist, your endocrinologist, your general practitioner, they are looking for disease. If you are still in normal range, regardless if that's high normal or low normal, you don't have a disease. So then they want you to leave. And that's okay. You have a stage 4 disease, your internist is going to save your life. But if you have something that's subclinically off, they're not going to know what to do with you. So that's where you see the ramifications of that chronic stress, is eventually you'll see kind of hypofunctioning of the adrenals, the thyroid, the reproductive hormones, that weight gain, the insulin going off, the glucose. They don't have diabetes, but things are just kind of off with those metabolic hormones. And then, of course, if you keep doing it that way, then eventually it will turn into a disease.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more, is that they try to put you in these parameters and that there's something that feels off because your normal isn't what's showing up on the blood work. I often compare it to my temperature is always low. Like my normal is lower than average. So when I go in and they test me and I'm just a little bit above average, they're like, you're good to go. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like I have a fever. This isn't my normal. They don't want to hear that. And so I can imagine that it's very similar to blood work is that, and these are large ranges that are provided as what are considered average. So I could check all the boxes and look good on paper, but I still don't feel good.
Exactly. And that's why one of the things that we had tested when we met the first time is we had checked your testosterone levels. So people always think, well, testosterone in a girl, what? No, that's a boy hormone. Yes, testosterone is a reproductive hormone for a man, but for us ladies, actually, I consider testosterone more of an adrenal hormone because we don't make it through our reproductive ovaries. Men make it through their reproductive doohickeys and gadgets and whatnot, but we make ours actually through our adrenal glands. We make DHEA, which is an abbreviation for a long supercalifragilistic hormone abbreviation, but we make DHEA through our adrenal glands and that converts into testosterone. So that's how you and I make testosterone. And for women, which is really sad, these reference ranges, where 2 to 45 is nanograms per deciliter is the reference range for females. So you can be normal at 2 or you can be normal at 45. That is a huge, broad expanse of a reference range. So for example, yours, not even 6 months ago, barely, in August, into August, your testosterone was at 12, and now we have it up to 45, which is perfect because we don't want to put you out of range. We don't want to put people's levels super physiological. We want to just put them in the optimal range because just like with your clients and your listeners, they don't want to be mediocre. We've got fast-paced lives. We've got great lives with lots of moving parts, and we want to be able to efficiently move with those parts rather than just feeling tired and draggy all the time.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I want to circle back with something that you had said about we run our businesses and that I help people reduce the stress from work. The reason that I do that is because I believe wholeheartedly that our businesses are here to serve us, not just who we serve through our clientele, but we chose entrepreneurship because we have a passion to be a business owner, to create a life that whatever we want by design. And I don't think that anybody wakes up and says, I want to own a business. I want to run my company so that I could be stressed every day and running from meeting to meeting and feel overwhelmed day in and day out. It just happens. And when it happens, that's where I come in, is that I look at how are you investing your time? Are you getting a return on that investment with regards to profits in your business? Or have you overextended yourself without that return? And one of the other things that I always say to you is, where are you creating self-created fires? I think that because of lack of planning, because we are running at such a fast pace, that a lot of our stress are things that we're actually doing to ourselves unless we take a step back and we relook at the way that we work. So that's the part that I come in on, that I think that while my stress wasn't necessarily directly from my work, I think that for a lot of people, it is their business that's creating the stress and weight gain and moodiness and all these symptoms that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, like you said, being an entrepreneur, especially in the beginning, you got to wear a lot of hats. And then even as a successful entrepreneur, you're probably wearing even more hats. And working with you to learn how to delegate, how to reduce some of the friction and try to reduce some of just maybe, like you said, being on a committee is a beautiful, wonderful thing to do. But if it's taking up time from your family and it's causing enormous amounts of stress that your creative energy has gone in the can, then maybe that committee isn't right for you at this time. So I think having an outside perspective like Amber to be able to say, hey, why don't you just put this on pause for a second and see how you feel? I think that would put a huge impact not only on just reducing somebody's stress level, but actually feeling good, having that creative energy. And then they'd probably notice that their energy goes up, because I have a lot of patients that we just work on, like we had talked about, just start walking. I've written letters for people to get them out of their memberships so that they didn't have to do these crazy gym memberships or whatnot, and just tell them, go walking and sleep an extra 45 minutes at night. And they lose the weight just by doing that. Tell them to eat more, eat healthier foods, eat more food, eat more calories in the proper kinds of foods, and they lose weight and feel better from that. So I do think, like you said about simplifying, it sounds great in concept, but sometimes you just really need a team to kind of help you do it.
Totally. Absolutely. And you were my team. So this is like I don't know, there's probably a popular saying, but I'll paraphrase it, but like the house cleaner that doesn't clean their own house, right? Like they'll come and they'll make your house amazingly beautiful, but they don't do it for themselves. So in this situation, I can help people reduce stress and do all this stuff, but I had to take a step back and look at, okay, well, where is my stress coming from? And who's the team that I need to circle around myself for me to reach my goals? And you were that person for me. I had just come to a point where I was so frustrated with being told that I was okay and I was not okay. And then coming to you, I was like, you know what? I know that I needed to take this step. And I remember you telling me, you said, you're 90% there, but let me help you get through the finish line. We're going to do this, this, and this, and then we're going to see how you feel. And based on how you feel, then we're going to tweak it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. You're not telling me to take a pill and go home and cross my fingers. It was you were trying to partner with me in having me feel a certain way.
Oh, yeah. And you had, like I said, 95% of the equation set up because we all have our personal equations. And you were eating well. You had cut out the gluten. You had cut out the sugar. You were eating whole foods. You weren't doing dairy, which can be very inflammatory. And you were exercising. And it was like, you know what? Let's revamp a little, manipulate a little bit. But at the same time, you had the equation set up. I just needed to add the frosting on it. And that was the thing was, and I'm sure with your listeners and your clients, is they're healthy, but they just don't feel fine. They want to run at a certain pace, which is completely normal, but they don't feel like they can, or they feel like you had mentioned before when we were talking, they feel like they're chasing their tail a little bit because they're not moving ahead because they're just trying to take care of all the little loose ends that are happening when really they want to just get ahead.
Right. Absolutely. So Dr. Davidson, when I met you, you were here in Las Vegas, right? So you were referred by a few people here in the community, but I've got great news for our listeners. You have since moved from Las Vegas, which means now you have a virtual practice. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I actually moved. Gosh, I lived in Las Vegas for 13 years and I loved it. And I still love Las Vegas. I'll probably do a kind of go back and forth. I don't think people realize what a beautiful community Las Vegas is. Beautiful people, and it's just a great place to live. But I actually did move to Washington State. I'm originally from Washington State. My family's here. So it's better for me to be here, to be near them, to kind of help them out. Because, we all have good stress and bad stress and family stress. So for me, it really worked out to move to Washington. My husband, now we actually have a full-time marriage because I was kind of doing the same thing you were, is he was going between our California office and Las Vegas and back and forth. So now we still have our California office. So technically I still have an office in California. Then we have an office here in Washington State. And really, because I didn't want to, I have a lot of patients from Las Vegas and actually from California as well, is, we didn't want to lose them, as I ended up kind of switching things more virtual. So, and I have some people actually fly up here and see me. We kind of go back and forth. So in the scheme of things, I've kind of turned things from a bricks and mortar to a semi bricks and mortar. And then we do a lot of phone consults, Skype consults, Zoom consults. I've learned how to do Google Hangouts. I've learned how to do, all of a sudden I went from circa 2003 bricks and mortar to now I feel like I'm kind of more of a techie now.
Yes, which is great for our listeners because they're all over the world. And what is more productive? Let me tell you this. I felt like, wow, I got this, is when you can talk to your doctor, literally not leave your desk, jump on a meeting or a call, have your appointment, get your consultation, and then you get right back to work. That's pretty efficient because most of us would spend hours driving to the doctor, sitting in the waiting room, and then just frustrated because we actually didn't even get help at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. You waste all this time. And of course, I was always really good about, and I still am about, because I really am very conscientious and respectful about people's time. I don't think somebody should call and make an appointment with a doctor, wait 2 weeks to 2 months to get in, and then have to wait in their waiting room for an hour and a half. I think that's really disrespectful of people's times because, like I said earlier, time is not a renewable resource. When I would make my doctor's appointments, because I had a good relationship with them, if they were running late, I'd say, call me and I'll come later. I'll do some shopping or something because we don't have time to waste. So it has actually worked out really well with people, and we can still get their blood work done. We can still use their insurance. If we have prescriptions, there's pharmacies all over the country.
Yeah. I mean, even when you were in Vegas, like I never waited. You always took me right back. So I will definitely be a testimonial to that. But also from day one, even you have my medication gets delivered from California, from a compound pharmacy there. And so it's all this, new age. Everyone is, there's no borders, right? And so when you find someone that can help you, you're not limited to just who's in your town or that kind of thing, which I think really empowers a lot of people to take their health into their own hands.
Exactly, because I do think that we're coming into a new age where we have to be our own health advocates. Because I have people that come to see me and they'll say, I asked my doctor to run, because I like to see certain tests, like a lot of times a doctor will run a TSH, a thyroid stimulating test, which is just checking for thyroid disease. I want to run the actual bioactive hormones of the free T4 and the free T3, and a lot of doctors won't even, there's even certain doctors that will refuse to run it, and that's okay, because that's how they do their practice. And then I tell people, if you don't resonate with that doctor, you have to find a new doctor. And so now we're with the internet and having, a lot more access to webinars and listening to doctors talk on webinars, is we can be our own health advocates. I even tell patients, or even podcast listeners, is I'll tell them, hey, if your doctor will not order your test, and you're in a community where maybe you might not have access to a functional medicine doctor, or maybe financially you're not ready for that, is you can order your own lab tests. I mean, nowadays we can order our own blood work, but you got to pay for it. And there's a lot of really good cash prices, but you don't necessarily have to make an appointment, wait 2 months to get in and then get blood work order and then wait 2 months to go back. And maybe they don't even run what you really want to get run.
Wow, I didn't know that. So share with our listeners, you are a functional medicine doctor. So share with our listeners, maybe they don't know or they think they know, but share with us what a functional medicine doctor is, or specifically what you do.
Well, for me, and functional medicine is more of a broad umbrella term that's been around for about 10 or 15 years. It's looking at more of literally the function of the body. So not just looking for disease, we want to put everything in more the optimal level. So for me, and every doctor works a little bit differently, is really, I like to do blood work. Some doctors do salivary tests. Some doctors do urine tests and hair analysis, and that's okay. If that works for them and they get the results, that's awesome. But for me, I've been doing blood tests for 14 years. I've been doing the blood tests. I know exactly what the optimal ranges are. And then when I like to communicate with a patient one-on-one, because what might work for one person would be totally different for another person. So just for example, the patient I just saw before this podcast, she's more of an athletic type, always been athletic. Her job is very athletic. She runs a little bit better with a little higher testosterone as kind of her hormonal balance, where somebody else that might have gravitated towards a different career path might not feel good with that level. So it's always about getting them in the optimal ranges, but then not treating them like they are numbers on a piece of paper. And with a lot of patients, especially with functional medicine, sure, I have people that have disease states, and we work very hard to work on that and backstep out of that. But the whole goal is not to get there. The whole goal is a little bit more preventative. What can we do to prevent that disease from manifesting? So that's kind of where I kind of come from it. So with patients that I work with, we look at their acute goals, their health, their, how they feeling, their energy, their weight, their libido, their sleep. Are they breaking out? Are they having hair loss? Are they having brain fog? Are they not having motivation? And then we also want to look at the long-term goals of, okay, you have a really big history of diabetes in your family. You might have that genetic card. You have a really big history of autoimmune disease. We want to make sure that that's not going to be in your future.
Yes. Okay, great. Now, you had said or referenced a podcast, and you weren't referencing my podcast that you're guesting on. You actually have your own podcast. So tell our listeners about your podcast and where they can find you, both if they want to utilize you as a doctor and to hear more from you on your own podcast.
Oh, yeah. And I love podcasting. I mean, my husband and I, now that we have our full-time marriage, we actually have a full-time practice together too. And our practice is Progress Your Health. ProgressYourHealth.com is our website, but we do a podcast as well called the Progress Your Health Podcast. And really, we're looking at people that are hormonal balancing from the aspect of, sure, prescriptions, lifestyle, supplementation, exercise. So we kind of go into all of that, with the males and the females.
That is awesome. And I love that you're using the medium of podcasting. You had said you loved it. And I had actually used you already and just like fell in love with you before I ever knew you were a podcaster. And somehow in my head, so this is like total honesty, I had on my list, like, I wonder if she would do it. Is that too big of an ask to ask your doctor to be on your podcast? And so I had it on my list of like, okay, potential guests. And then somehow I like read an email from you and maybe the signature line and it said you had a podcast. I'm like, no way. No way. Okay, she's totally going to be on my podcast and I can't wait to download it and listen to it. And so it was just like destined that we were here today because we're both here to serve. And while productivity and health seem maybe not to naturally go together, I'm telling you they 100% go together because we are what runs our business, as good as we are and how much we invest in ourselves. Because many people that are listening, unfortunately, are not in a place that if they're not well or they're sick, that their business is truly going to go on without them. They are their business. And so it really makes sense to totally invest in yourself and your health and to be at your optimal, not just for your business, but for your family and for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Like I had said earlier, sometimes people don't know what to let go of. So they need you to kind of help with that productivity and that efficiency. And maybe even, which is what I work with patients too, is giving some validation of saying, hey, don't beat yourself up. This is why things are manifesting this way. And like you said, as being an entrepreneur or having your own business, you're the star of the show. Nobody would ever make the star they always want to help the star. Like, here, eat right, feel good, let's keep your energy up. Let's keep you, well maintained. We can't let the star drag in the mud.
Exactly. So that's what we were doing today, is talking about how to make sure that no one's dragging through the mud and feeling sluggish and that they're at their optimum selves. So Dr. Davidson, I want to thank you so much for being so gracious and generous to be here today to serve us and serve the community of Productivity Straight Talk. I hope you have a very productive week and thanks for joining us.
Oh, I appreciate everything, Amber. Take care. Bye now.
Well, there you have it, my interview with Dr. Davidson. Now, this interview happened several months ago as I batch my interviews. And since then, my health has been increasingly getting better and better, just in case you might be wanting to know. This journey has been a long journey. And in fact, you heard me referencing changing my diet. I have been still on the same gluten-free, dairy-free diet for a little over a year now. And that has created a huge impact in the way that I feel on a day-to-day basis, in addition to the additional recommendations that Dr. Davidson made for me and my unique situation and what I was going through. I have absolutely loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk. Now, this wasn't a normal episode by any means, but I think that it was an important episode. Because while your symptoms or you may not be going through the exact same situation as I was or I am, I want to empower you to take a look and really dive deep and ask yourself, is there something else going on that could be affecting your productivity, your energy, the growth of your business, your focus? All of those things are so, so important, not to even mention our relationships with our family, with the people that we love. If we are not our best, we cannot show up in the world our best. I want you to fill in the blank for yourself. What is it that you want to commit to taking action on, to change in your life so that you can show up your best self? This could be a wide range of things. It could be having less drinks during the week. It could be working out more often. This could be quitting smoking. This could be having more time with your family or your children. What is it that you need to show up your best self? Because when we are our best selves, we perform at peak performance. Our businesses grow, our relationships expand. So what is that for you? You know, if you're a regular listener, that I close out every show the same way. And this is truly from my heart. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business, plus life. So based on what you learned today, what are you willing to take action on? When you were listening into my conversation with Dr. Davidson, what were you thinking? What was going through your head? What came up for you? Because this experience of listening to this podcast is so much less about me, so much less about my story, but rather when you're listening to it, what did it bring up for you? Because chances are whatever it brought up for you is the very thing that you want to choose to take action on to get different results in your business and life. Now, I would absolutely love if you will share your actionables and receive support, guidance, and motivation from entrepreneurs just like you. You can join us on the inside of our Productivity Straight Talk private Facebook community. And it's in there that we do after the show downloads. We go deeper on each of the topics each week. And there is a level of accountability because when you announce, even if it is to a stranger, what it is that you're committed to doing, that action of fully thinking out what that action is and explaining it and writing it and getting it out of your head is a level of accountability that oftentimes gets you better results. I would love for you to join us, and you can join us by going to productivitycommunity.com. Again, that's productivitycommunity.com. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I know that I told you this is episode 52, so it's officially 1 year of my podcast, Productivity Straight Talk. And I don't know about you, but I like getting people anniversary gifts. And since this is my 1 year anniversary, I'm going to ask that you leave me a review. If you have not already done so, I would really like it if you would go onto iTunes and leave a review. You see, this is hard work putting out a podcast every week, but it's hard work that I enjoy. But when I get reviews and I hear that my podcasts are really making a difference and helping people, it keeps me going. It keeps my energy levels high. It keeps me focused on wanting to go deep and bring you episodes like I did today. I would be honored if you would take the time to go jump on over to iTunes and leave me a review. What this does is it also helps others discover the show so that I can share my message to more and more entrepreneurs. That's my straight talk for you today. And until next time, have a productive week.